Hi, everyone. I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg, and I am your host of Yoga Birth Babies. And today we're going to talk about how to prepare for a positive birth. Now, I think the important thing about thinking about a positive birth, it doesn't mean that your birth is going to look exactly how you envision, because most of the time there's some twists and turns, and there's no idealized way that one should birth. A positive birth is about how you feel after the birth, how you are made to feel by the folks there. So we're going to talk about the importance of education, the importance of understanding expectations. We're going to talk about making sure if you're partnered, how your partner is on board, and how your full birth team is there to support you, and how you need to be embraced during your birth experience. So to have this conversation, I have Moran Liviani. You might know her from her Instagram account, To Life Doula. She has a beautiful account. If you haven't seen it, check it out. So let me tell you a little bit about Moran. She is a birth doula, a Lamaze childbirth educator, a hypnobirthing practitioner, and a placental encapsulation specialist. She has been working with families in birth for 11 years now and is passionate about helping new parents walk away from their birth feeling truly transformed and empowered. And I really enjoyed this conversation with Moran. We're very aligned in the understanding of how birth can really transform people, how it can also traumatize people, and how we think that if the people around you can really hold the space for you, how no matter what is happening, the twists and turns, that you can emerge feeling really positive about that birth experience. So I think you're going to get a lot of very practical and inspiring information from this podcast. Now, before I jump into this conversation with Moran, I just want to give some updates about PYC. So as I recorded this, we just hit our 21st birthday. I can't believe it. I have to tell you, I still remember the day I got the keys for our original studio. We've moved since then to a studio down the street, and it was a 5-year lease. And I so clearly remember thinking, I doubt I'm even going to be here at the end of this 5 years, but okay, let's get started. And I remember putting the key in the door. It was this big brown door, and opening it up to this very beautiful, small, sun-soaked room with these high ceilings. It was amazing to think how things have changed my own journey. It's been 21 years. I've had quite a few things happen in this time. And the amazing lives we have touched during this time. We've had over 22,000 students and families come through our center. It is an honor and a joy to have been part of so many lives. And things continue to expand. Ever since going online with all our classes, our community has grown by leaps and bounds. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for those that have entrusted us along this path. And thank you for those that continue to walk this path with us. We've got classes in studio, online, on demand. We've got a huge on-demand library. So between prenatal, postnatal, baby and me, childbirth ed, lactation prep, newborn care, we've got it all to support you on this huge perinatal adventure that you're on. And then the last thing I just want to remind everybody of, so yes, of course we serve new and expectant parents, but we also support yoga teachers who want to take the next steps in their education and become prenatal yoga teachers. So if that resonates with you and you want to take a very deep dive into a very thorough training to feel prepared to support the perinatal community, check out our website, prenatalyogacenter.com, and learn all about how we can work together. Okay, that is enough of me. We're going to take a super quick break, and we come back. Please enjoy my conversation with Moran. Hi, Moran. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. I'm always about full transparency. So for folks out there, this
Yeah.
is kind of late in the evening for me. So I'm really excited though to chat with you.
Yeah.
So I want to get to know you a little because I've seen you on Instagram, which is an incredible account that you have. You really put out great work. So I feel like in a way, because I've been following you for so long, I have a little sense of you, but I'd love to get to know you a little bit more. So why don't you
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into birth work?
Okay. Well, so my name is Moran. I kind of got into birth work truly by accident, I think. Basically, I had my first baby girl about 19 years ago. And when I was pregnant with her, I really didn't know much about pregnancy and birth. I knew that I wanted to kind of have natural experience, but I really didn't kind of seek out what that meant. And so we were kind of just doing what everybody kind of does. And just when I found out I was pregnant, I went to the GP and just basically said, I just want to confirm it with a blood test. And it was confirmed. And then he said to me, well, here's a list of some obstetricians. And me kind of being kind of, in our religious background as a Jewish girl, you kind of pick the Jewish doctor. So I went ahead and I just picked the Jewish name from the list. And I was like, okay, he might be good. So, and that's literally how I picked it. I just went and picked the name and I went to see this obstetrician and he was just not really attentive. I really kind of sat in the waiting room more than I actually saw the guy. And it was just very formal, just doing all the observations and kind of saying, well, I'll see you again in a month or 2 weeks and whatever it was at the time. And then, again, I really didn't seek out anything during the pregnancy. I didn't go to childbirth education classes. I didn't do any sort of like,
Did
uh,
you stick with him as your OB?
I did. I thought that was normal because there were so many people in the waiting room. I thought, well, this guy must be really good. Like everyone's coming to him, and like it just. I thought that based on the type of people and the amount of people that were waiting for him, he was really sought after, and he must have been really, really good. And that's the only kind of review that I was kind of looking for as kind of an affirmation for me that I picked the right guy, which was, as I know today, not exactly the way to go. But I just went with the flow. I was kind of, let's go with the flow. The doctor knows what he's doing. I really have no idea what I'm doing, and I might as well pick somebody who does. And so I bought one book during pregnancy, and it was What to Expect When You're Expecting. And it's the worst book ever, in my opinion. It just did not give me any sort of
It's like the
tools.
book of fear.
It is. It's like the book of fear. And it really just focused on developmentally what was happening to the baby, what was happening kind of physiologically in the woman's body, but not really delving into kind of the tools or what really happens in the woman's body holistically. And so I really didn't get anything out of that book, but rather like, oh, my baby's not a pea right now, it's now a grapefruit. And things like that. And so as the day came near to the birthing day, I saw my OB and he had an appointment with me. I think it was around like 38 weeks. And he said to me, well, listen, Moran, if you don't go into labor by 40 weeks, then I've booked you in for an induction. And so I was like, oh, well, okay. I kind of thought, okay, well, I guess he knows what he's doing. And I was quite young. I was 24 at the time. And I was like, okay, well, I guess this is just how you do things. And so I was really frightened, though. I remember feeling a really sense of kind of real dread about it, but really not knowing what that meant and really kind of not listening to my intuition. And so thankfully, I spontaneously went into labor 2 days before my estimated due date. And the first contraction that I had, I was absolutely horrifically mortified. I wanted the whole thing to stop. And it was just like, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. I'm not ready to be a mother. What have I done? It was just a real sense of fighting with my head. And I just really didn't want to go through it. And it was more a battle of the minds than it was a battle of what was happening in my body physically. And so I made my husband call the hospital and ask them if I could have a cesarean. And my husband did. He rang the hospital and spoke to the midwife and asked her if I could have a cesarean. And the midwife said, we don't offer cesarean as a method of pain relief. I was like, oh, shit, I actually have to go through this. So then I went through 2 days of labor with her. And I truly, honestly believe that I went through that long of the labor because I was just mentally fighting my body and every single thing that I was feeling. And so by the end of it, I got the full cascade of intervention with, going on epidural, having Synto, eventually having forceps and, episiotomy and all that comes with it. And by the end of it, when my doctor kind of delivered her and handed her over to me, I felt completely numb. And I was like, oh, holy shit, like, is that what birth is? Like, I really didn't get it. And I remember eventually when she was kind of like in the bassinet and stuff, and I said to my husband, adore her because she's the last biological child we are ever having together. This is not happening again. And so it really kind of bothered me in a huge way because I felt like what was wrong with me? How was I so weak to not be able to go through this and not want to have any more children? And all these women were having these multitude of kids. And like, I remember going with her to the park for a walk, when she was kind of 4 months old or whatever, and seeing mothers with like 2, 3 children. And I was like, what is wrong with these women that they're going back for more? Like, how can they go through this again and again? And I just did not get it. And so I had lots of postnatal anxiety, which really took over my life. And I had definitely a little bit of postnatal depression just from constantly feeling anxious. And the birth was quite traumatic in my mind. And I just couldn't find a way to articulate what I was feeling. And so we decided at that point not to discuss having any more kids. And so I actually came from a family of 3. And I always wanted to have lots of kids in the house and lots of noise and that livelihood and stuff like that. And it really kind of got to me that I wasn't able to do that. And so a few years went by, and like my daughter was about 3 and a half kind of thing. And I said, oh, well, I think I'm ready to try again. I think I'm ready. So at that point we moved, we were living, when my first baby girl, we were living in Sydney, and then we moved to the Gold Coast, and I kind of surrounded myself with more kind of like-minded women. And at the time, one of my friends said to me, why don't you try and get a doula for your next baby? And so I was like, what's a doula? I had no idea what a doula was. And so it wasn't at the time of Google where you could just like look everything up. So I had to actually research what a doula was. And so I did. And it sounded like everything I ever wanted. I wanted to have that person there who knows birth, can normalize it in my eyes, who is able to get to know me and know also the things that would trigger me in labor, and be there to hold my hand and guide me as someone who's been there before. You know what I mean? And that was really, really important to me more than anything else. And so I wanted somebody there to be for me and my partner. And so I spoke to that doula once we got pregnant, and I hired her, and she was absolutely amazing. And so the only thing I did in my second pregnancy that I did with my first is that, again, I booked an obstetrician. And I think the reason that, when I look kind of in hindsight, the reason that I kind of booked an obstetrician at that point was because I just wanted that safety blanket of what if you fail kind of thing? What if you kind of like, you can't do this kind of thing? And so for me, that was kind of my safety blanket. And I remember at one of my appointments with him, he gave me, he kind of put across the table like a consent form to get an epidural. And I said to him, no, I'm not going to get an epidural this time. I'm going to have a completely natural birth. And he gave a little chuckle, and he said, women in labor, they change their minds all the time. And I was like, no, I'm not gonna change my mind. And if I do, I know what an epidural is. I've had one before. I'm happy to sign one on the day. And so he kind of put it away and let that go. And so I did all the mental preparation that I could during that pregnancy. And I was totally on board with all the things that I wanted. I discussed all the things that I wanted with my doula and with my husband. And we were all on the same page with what I wanted for this birth and what could possibly come up for me from the last birth, so that it wasn't something that would be an obstacle. And so With my second, I went into labor in the middle of the night. And I remember that first sensation of that contraction because it reminded me of my first. But this time, because I did all that kind of pre work, I actually felt excitement instead of fear. And so as things kind of went along during the night, I just went back to sleep. And when I woke up in the morning, I remember they were kind of got intensifying a little bit more. But my hubby and I went for a walk. Um, we were living near the Broadwater, and we kind of went a walk over the bridge into the Broadwater and then went to a cafe. I remember eating a croissant while having a contraction. It was just like a beautiful day. And so as things started to even more intensify, I rang and got my doula there, and she was with me. And then my waters broke, and she said to me at that point, listen, we should head into the hospital. And I said to her, I don't think I want to go to the hospital. I think I want to have this baby at home. And so I said to her, can you fill up my bathtub? I want to have her at home. And so I got into the bathtub, and then I birthed her in the bathtub, just with the doula and my husband there. And it was the most amazing experience ever. I could have had a baby a week later. I felt that great. It was me rediscovering my strength, and it was me kind of feeling my own power again, which I kind of lost in that first birth. And it wasn't just about kind of showing myself what physically I can do. It was more about what I could mentally do and what I could mentally overcome. And it totally changed my life. And I was like, oh, that little spark in me was like, I think I want to do this. Like, I want to be that person for other people, to normalize that experience for them, and show them that they don't have to have this traumatic birth. They could have this amazing experience the first time around. And so it kind of sparked something in me. And then with my third, I had my doula again, and she was just absolutely amazing. And that's when I started. When my third daughter was born, I started studying to be a doula. And then when she was kind of one, I started attending births, and I've been doing it ever since. So it's been like 11 years now. And yeah, it's a work of passion for sure.
Do you think that what was your doula's reaction? You're like, okay, we're not going to the hospital, change of plans.
Yes.
Like, was she thinking like,
yes.
what?
Yeah. So I knew that my doula, which I don't do, she attended what's called free births. So where you don't have a medical person
Right.
in attendance. And I knew in the back of my mind that she did attend. I never planned to do that myself ever, because that is so not me. I like order things. I'm very in control of things, and I'm a total planner. So for me to say that, it was just, I felt so good in the space. And she looked at me, and there was no kind of uncertainty. There was no doubt. There was nothing in her eyes that made me think that I wasn't safe. And so she just went along with it, and she just did it. And it was just incredible.
So I absolutely loved your birth stories. And what I think it's so important is our whole topic today is how to prepare for a positive birth.
Yeah.
And so authentic that you had what unfortunately sounded like a pretty traumatic birth, but
Yeah.
then took it into your own hands to change the narrative for your next two births.
Yes. Yes, definitely. I think I think a lot of women, like most women that I kind of guide through their second pregnancies, have unfortunately had quite a similar experience to mine. So it kind of lets me, especially in doing this for a number of years, lets me relate to them, and not just be able to kind of go, yeah, I understand, without actually have had that experience myself, which gives me a good kind of insight into what they're feeling. So which is great.
So let's dive into that. Let's talk about how to prepare for a positive birth. So as a doula, and I believe also hypnobirthing teacher,
Yeah.
correct? And
Yes.
childbirth educator. Because I remember looking and I'm like, oh my gosh, this woman has a lot of I'm kind of the same way. I'm like, let's get all the certifications. Let's do all the learning. So, it's a little bit like a birth junkie. So where do you start helping clients prepare for their upcoming births?
Yeah. So initially, when I meet clients for the first time, the first and most important thing for me is kind of learning who they are and what their history is. So a lot of the times they'll come from a history where either their mom has told them her birth stories, or they'll have siblings who've had kind of either good or bad experiences. And even for me, it's really important to know what the birth stories are from the side of the dad, just to kind of know what what kind of their history is so that I know how to work with them. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that makes a huge difference to how they look at birth and what they want the outcome to be as well. So getting to know them is really, really important. And then kind of getting to know what their ideal birth is, because as much as we as doulas want this physiological experience for them to have this kind of natural intervention free or minimal intervention birth, some women just want that experience of, I just want to be able to go in on a certain day or have this certain medication or whatever the case may be. And that's okay too. So I don't want them to feel guilty for wanting this or that, because at the end of the day, I truly believe that a positive birth experience is an experience where the parents had full autonomy and they were respected through their choices. They were able to make informed decisions, having all the education and information and the research behind what they were choosing. And they were able to have a voice to say what they want. And when they have all those aspects, they're able to have that positive birth experience. So I try to explain to them that there's absolutely no kind of guilt for wanting the things that they want. Because I feel sometimes, we share all these Instagram accounts showing these kind of amazing births, and we're only showing kind of a snippet of a birth that might have been 30, 40 hours. And we're only showing like a 5-minute video of like the most empowering, beautiful bits. But there was a lot of bits where mums hit a wall and dads needed a break, and, it was getting too much, and lots of fluids coming out and lots of things that, they didn't expect, was coming out of their body. And they were having maybe moments where they've had kind of crisis of confidence and things like that. And that's okay too. And I think that we need to start showing that to be realistic.
Yes,
Not
I
just, yeah.
totally agree. And okay, so let's actually take a quick break. When we come back, let's talk about expectations, because I think you hit something that we see these stories on Instagram and immediately we can have these expectations, which I think can be problematic. So,
Yeah.
okay, let's take a quick break and we'll come back. That's where we're going. Okay, so we're back. So expectations. I feel like I totally get that, because my own first birth was 42 hours
Yeah.
and I was not expecting that. I mean, this is what I do. I'm a childbirth educator as a doula. This is my world. So my expectations were kind of shot. So something I try to tell my prenatal students is to think about birth as a river that can't be pushed, but we need to let it flow.
Yeah.
And as someone who loves control,
We all
that is not so easy. So how do you help your clients to surrender that desire for control and relinquish these set expectations that either they get from social media or just in their own mind?
Well, first of all, I've been teaching hypnobirthing for many years, and I actually found early on when I was teaching hypnobirthing that a lot of women were not having the hypnobirthing births that they were expecting, and so a lot of them actually turned out to be quite traumatic. And in speaking to these women, I was kind of looking, well, why did they find it so traumatic? Like, they've done all the kind of previous learning and kind of they really invested a lot into the mind-body connection and things like that. And why are they still walking away feeling traumatic? And the common theme was that, like you said, their expectations were not realistic. And so we can't guide women to think that birth is only allowed to look a certain way. And I think these women kind of set these expectations of like, if only the pain doesn't reach this level, if only I don't scream, if only I don't have an epidural, if only this, if only that. And then they walk away from their birth going, well, I had an epidural, so the birth has gone to shit. And you know what I mean? Like, there's no point looking back on it and thinking it was a positive experience. And so they're walking away from these experiences going, I now have birth trauma because I so believed that I could do it and I didn't. You know what I mean? And I think one of the biggest things and the most important, valuable things that I do with clients is set them the correct expectations of like, birth is unpredictable. There are certain things that we can control in birth, and that's what we need to work on now. And we need to surrender to the things that we can't. You know what I mean? So it's really important that, for example, like dads especially watch birthing videos to see how a woman moves and sounds, and how a dad supports her in labor, so how the partners supporting each other in labor and things like that, so that they can get a realistic view of what that would look like and what that woman would sound like, because she's not going to be the same woman that's next to you right now.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's when they, like, I've seen that the more the partners get involved, no matter who the birth support is, you know what I mean? It could be her friend, it could be her hubby, it could be anybody, you know what I mean? Like, the more the partners get involved, the more that the birth goes well, because they are comfortable with the experience and they're not holding back in terms of thinking that they want to save that woman, you know what I mean? So there's quite a big difference between sympathizing for the woman or empathizing for that woman. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So if they start sympathizing for her, they're starting to feel like, oh, you know, she's tired. I want to save her. I can't see her like that anymore. But that's coming from their own kind of fears.
Mm-hmm.
But when they empathize for her, yes, they see her tired. They feel her pain, but they're wanting to help her get through it. And that
Yeah.
makes a huge difference for how they.
I remember doing some births where the partner, they always meant well. And I love how you're saying the difference in sympathy and empathy.
Mm,
And sometimes the partner's anxiety about what they're seeing their loved one in a
mm,
very different mindset. And
yeah.
like you said, making sounds and moving their body and not the person that they see on a regular basis.
Mm,
And I'd seen some partners not meaningly kind of sabotage things by being like, "Are you sure you don't want the epidural?" And it's not that they mean to, but it comes from a place
yeah.
of not sure what else to do. And so
Yeah.
I love that you're saying, look at videos, see what birth looks like. So when it's in front of you, it's not scary and you recognize that
Yeah.
this is actually a normal part
Yeah.
of an unmedicated birth. So I love how you use
Yeah.
videos that way.
Yeah.
Super
And
smart.
it's not the unknown, you know what I mean? Like when they're walking to that, if you think, you know, kind of partners only came into the birth space, if you think in like the 1960s, late 1960s,
Yeah.
1970s, and they don't know anything to do about, like, anything to do with labor. They really have not had that kind of instinctive primal knowing, you know what I mean? Because women
Right.
are always guided by other women. And so we need to give them a bit more education and we need to support them. And sometimes all it takes for me at a birth is just to give a dad a high five and kind of go, yeah, she's sounding amazing. And then he's got that reassurance of like, oh, okay, it's okay.
This is right. This is
Yeah,
normal. Yeah.
exactly. You know what I mean?
So let's circle back to before we even get to the videos, the importance of childbirth education. So,
Yeah.
what do you want to say about that?
Yeah. I think it's paramount to the experience. I think that the childbirth education that most parents get at the hospital is not at all sufficient enough for what parents need to know. And it really focuses on policies, procedures, and the pharmacological menu of options they've got available to them, which I don't think is what mothers need to kind of see or hear at that point in time. I think they need to be educated on that, but not just that. At a recent birth I went to just here at a hospital, just a local hospital here, I went after the mom had the baby. I went to the cafeteria just to get her something, to like the snack area, to get her something to eat. And as I was walking the hallway, there was a painting of kind of a well-known obstetrician just holding forceps. And I was thinking to myself, like, they do tours through that hospital. And I was thinking to myself, what would I as a mother expecting a baby would feel when I'm walking the corridors of this hospital and they're kind of memorializing this photo, like this painting of this doctor holding forceps. That wouldn't make me feel all giddy inside to go, oh, I can't wait for that to come inside of me. You know what I mean? Like, it would just not make me feel good. And so I'm thinking we need to change the scene for women. We need to start kind of, again, even normalizing it in the hospital with the education that they're getting to show women in their full power, you know, being really primal, and being on the floor, being kind of in active birth positions, and like really kind of embracing the kind of the primal women that we are when we birth. And so when it comes to education, it's really subpar at the hospital. They're not giving you what you need. And so I think you need to get independent childbirth education, whatever that is. And so, and with that, I think comes kind of the education behind what happens in the woman's body when she goes into labor. Like, what are the hormones? Why are the hormones so important? How can I make the hormones even more so work in my benefit rather than inhibit what's happening? And also kind of thinking about how our mammalian brain works, and thinking about, we are just like any other mammal. Like, we need darkness. We need to feel unobserved. We need to feel safe. We need to have people around us who trust us. So I really kind of focus about, who are you surrounding yourself with in labor? And a lot of women kind of tick off the list of like, well, I've done the acupuncture, I've done the hypnobirthing, I've done the osteo, I've done, my meditation every day and all that. And they always kind of sometimes miss the missing link, which is oxytocin. Well, are you feeling relaxed? Are you feeling loved? Are you surrounding yourself with people who believe in you? Because you're not going to go into labor when you're not feeling those things. You know what I mean? So because they're trying to kind of, especially in the later stages, because we have such a high induction rate, they're trying to go into labor with any method, you know what I mean? And that doesn't work if you don't feel safe. And to feel safe, you need to feel lots of oxytocin. And so I think that's what they learn in the classes. They learn what's valuable, what's important, how do I bring labor on naturally in terms of allowing my hormones to do what they need to do. What are the stages of labor in terms of what would my body go through these stages, and exactly setting the expectation of like, yes, birth can be 40 hours, but it doesn't mean 40 hours of active labor. It means that you might have gone to sleep that night and you might have felt some twinges here and there, and you are still able to walk, talk, read a book, have a full-on conversation with someone. You're able to eat, you're able to, vocalize your wants and needs. And yes, when it does get more intense, it's probably going to be 6 to 12 hours of intense labor, but it's not 40 hours that you're always in 40-hour labor of intense pain. And what do you do when you reach that stage? What do you have as your comfort measures? All of that is important as part of your independent childbirth education, is to get those tools so that if you do reach the stage where you need something extra, not only you know what to do, but your partner knows what to do for you, which is really
important. I totally agree. And I love that you're really putting such an emphasis on childbirth education, because if we look at the hormones, if someone doesn't have that base knowledge of childbirth ed and an understanding of what's normal, what's not normal, then the fear is going to come up. And we know, if we're talking hormones, when that adrenaline rises, the oxytocin just can't compete. It's just going to be problematic. So I really appreciate your very strong grounding approach of childbirth that I wholeheartedly agree. So I want to circle a little bit back to birth partners and how I mentioned sometimes they can be not always on board. And I've found that sometimes I see some of them kind of like smiling, but like, okay, this is what we're doing, but not really there.
Yeah.
What are your suggestions if a birth partner is having a hard time getting on board with the birth plan, or if they just don't have a lot of confidence in birth, because like you said, they haven't necessarily been brought up around it, and it's not necessarily as instinctual for some folks.
I've had a few couples where the partners didn't want to kind of attend sessions and things like that. And I always say to the moms, if you're going to have that person in your birth space, they need to attend the sessions with you. And that's really, really important, not only for getting the education, but also getting a sense of how to be able to support you in labor, because they are the one that you trust the most. So when I do have sessions and I feel like the partners are not totally on board, I actually am quite honest and frank with them. And I say to them, listen, you need to be honest with me of what's holding you back, because sometimes it just might be their own insecurities. And sometimes it might just be that what they don't know is scaring them. And so we kind of work through what is initially not drawing them to know more. what is it that is kind of holding them back? Might be from their own birth history. So usually I find most of the time it's from something that's happened to either a sibling or like to their mothers, in their mother's stories of their own births and things like that. And sometimes it's a real fear of what's going to happen. So what I find is the more that they attend the sessions, the more that they become educated, you find that they're the biggest advocate for natural birth and for the physiological experience. And I've had dads that have been completely not on board, but once they kind of know what goes into it and they kind of see the videos, they get the education, we talk about even the kind of technical things of like, what are the birth preferences and what might be offered in the hospital for her and what are your options with that, and talk about the evidence behind all those things. They are the biggest advocates by the end of the day. So I think it all comes from a sense of fear. And I think it comes from a sense of not knowing and thinking that, they probably think, women do this every day. Why do I need to be a part of this? This is women's business. But at the end of the day, I always tell women, if you reach a point in labor where you've hit a wall, you will be scouring that room for your weakest link, the person that you want to save you, and that will be your partner. You know what I mean? And you want to look at him. And when you say, because usually when women hit a wall, they'll say, I want an epidural. I can't do this anymore. And you want him to say to you something that will empower you and not just something that will save you at that moment. You're looking for help, but not help in a way of just get me the anesthetist. You're looking for help as in, you need to say something to me because you know me best. And I teach them, what would that be? Like we talk about, what would that be? It will be something that's going to be very personal to you from your own life experiences. And you have to know that you're going to be the one that's going to be there for her in that moment. She's going to be looking to you to save her from what's going on, but not to save her as in get her pharmacological pain relief, to save her as in to lift her up and walk this journey along with her. And you need to learn how to do that. And so they really get on board to see how much kind of involvement they need to actually be in terms of helping her through the birth. And when they see that they're not just a bystander to it all, they actually want to get quite involved. It really does kind of do a complete flip around to how they want to help the mother through labor.
That's beautiful. Now, I've seen some couples together
Yeah.
that it's just astonishing. Like you could just see the partnership and the support and the holding the space for the person laboring and just the reverence for like, look what you're doing. I think it's really, some of these images that reflect back my mind are absolutely beautiful. So what are some ways that people can mentally prepare for the unpredictability of birth? Because let's face it, no matter what kind of birth plan you set out for, there's a very strong chance that the majority of it will not happen as envisioned, as we talked about.
Yep. Well, during kind of pregnancy, I talk to them about, again, like what's their ideal experience. And then I have them start kind of visualizing their birth a little bit. And I ask them if they're quite visual people, and we talk about what that would look like. And I actually say to them, I want you to kind of visualize the birth of what you want as though you're watching a movie. You know what I mean? I want you to be really kind of very concrete with what goes into your mind, and think about like the scene as though you're watching a movie, what you're wearing, what the weather's like, what the smell in the room is like, what you're sounding like. And I really want you to connect to how you're feeling. And I say to them, and when you've got these visualizations, I want you to think about, if anything comes up as a what if, I want you just to take that kind of what if out of your mind for right now. And so the more that they become kind of entrenched in kind of that visualization, they kind of build a secure kind of home for what they're wanting in their minds. And the mind doesn't know the difference between reality or not, so they think they've already been in that picture. And then once we kind of unravel that, and usually after I see them for a couple of sessions, they kind of go, yeah, but I'm having a big fear about this or that. And I say that's okay. You don't have to go into birth without fear. Like it's about just not letting that fear take a hold of you. And then I kind of talk them through and say, well, listen, there are certain things that we can control in labor, and there's certain things that we can't. So we talk about the things that we can control, such as let's, have your birth preferences written up in terms of what you want and what you don't want. We can control what goes into your mind if things happen that kind of stray out of plan. So thinking about like, if you reach a point that you want pain relief, that's okay. What will that look like? And what will I say to myself that if I do need that extra pain relief on board, not having the expectation that if I do get that I failed in any way. And then we talk about what would a cesarean look like? And we draw up even a cesarean birth preferences so that even if it does go down that path, what would that look like then? So that they've got all their kind of, plans like plan A, plan B, plan C, all kind of mapped out. And then when the birth comes, they're not feeling like it's out of their control. So we're kind of working, how they do kind of, like the serenity prayer, like,
Mm-hmm.
give me the courage to know what I cannot change, and give me the wisdom to kind of accept it, basically. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
it's basically that. It's about kind of working through, what am I able to change? What can I have no control over? And kind of accepting the outcome for what it is. As long as I've had that support, I've had that autonomy, I've had that respect, I've taken care of everything, every eventuality that can happen. Now I need to just let go and cease the control that I'm holding on to. Because if I keep on holding on that control, I'm actually going to be holding on to my baby and not able to let that go. You know what I mean? So it's about teaching them how to do that, and teaching them that the expectation and that holding on to something can actually obstruct their labor and create more adrenaline, and
Right.
being able to kind of let that go. Like I've supported women through highly medicalized births, because they needed to, for certain medical conditions and things like that. And they still walk away and go, wow, that's amazing. Like I've had the most positive experience ever, because they had that preparation ahead of time. They had that kind of expectation ahead of time.
Right. And for them, it wasn't, they had a certain idea of what they wanted, and it didn't have to meet kind of an idealized version. They had whatever someone wants. Like you said, they're respected, they have autonomy, and
Mm,
then that can lead to a more positive birth experience. But it was interesting, as you were saying something in that last question, it made me think about your first kind of going back to what you said about your first birth experience of the holding on,
mm,
that when we have that something in us that isn't ready to let go,
yeah.
then that can obstruct how we birth. So kind of throwing it back to
Mm.
the original conversation that we started about your own birth stories, what do you think your biggest lesson was then from your own personal birth experience with your children?
For me, I think my biggest lesson is that, I think I didn't have as much kind of reverence for the power of women, and from my own personal power. I think that I didn't think I was capable of what I did. And even with my last birth, she was actually my longest birth because she was posterior. And it
Mm,
was quite a mentally challenging labor for me. And yet I still did it with just, again, focusing on what was going in my mind. And I remember even with her birth, in terms of that control and that expectation, we were living up at the hinterland, in the Gold Coast, which is all kind of like, you've got mountains and mountains and like one-way roads everywhere. And I remember when we moved up there when I was pregnant, my worst nightmare was to actually be stuck behind a truck going 5 kilometers an hour when I'm in labor. And that's exactly what happened.
oh.
And so I remember, because I was in labor for quite a while with her, and I remember as we were going down the mountain and my husband was driving, my doula was in the passenger seat and I was in the back, like in full labor, like feeling like I need to push her. And I said to my doula and my husband, make sure they get the epidural ready. And no one was saying anything back to me. And I remember thinking at that point, I'm fighting the pain. I'm fighting the pain. I need to let go. I just need to just surrender to it. And again, like when I said surrender, it felt like I was riding the waves rather than fighting my body. And it's
Mm,
just this big shift that happened in my body. It suddenly wasn't as painful as what I expected it to be anymore, because I wasn't fighting my body anymore. And so the biggest kind of lesson for me in all of my births is that I have so much control with my mind. Like I have this biggest tool, and that's what I kind of talk with couples about. It's like your biggest tool you've already got. it's your mind. Like birth is 95% mind. Like everything that you do and everything that how you handle the pain, how you handle everything that happens within your body and how you kind of even move throughout your labor is controlled by what's going on in your mind. And so I teach them to kind of work with that rather than against it.
That makes so much sense with your background with hypnobirthing, which is a lot about the mind.
Yes.
And I call it changing the channel. That if the mind is going one way, that's not helping you, that's creating more panic. We need to change the channel. And I know there's a lot of practice in hypnobirthing. So it's just interesting hearing your reverence for the power of the mind. And
Yeah,
as a yoga teacher, I have a lot of reverence for it, the
yeah, for
quiet
sure.
mind and as well as the body and how they work together. There's really quite the connection.
Mm.
Wow, I've so enjoyed this. All right, we're going to take another quick break. When we come back, what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents? We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. So, I feel like you can go from anything. I mean, we're talking about preparing for a positive birth. You can use something from that. Maybe I didn't ask about that, or you have 3 kids. You've been a doula and a childbirth educator. So, I'm curious to see where you're gonna pull from for this question.
Yeah. So I think the biggest tip I can say is pick wisely in terms of the people you surround yourself in birth.
Mm,
That can have a huge influence on how you birth, and make sure that whoever you pick in your space is someone that will uplift you and make sure that they kind of remind you of your power. You know what I mean? Like I remember in all of the experiences that I had, women can be kind of mega prepared in terms of everything that they've done in pregnancy. And it only takes one person in the room to discount what they're feeling and to
absolutely.
discount where they're at. You know what I mean? So like I kind of bring it back to when I had my second baby. I actually had my mom come over from Israel to be with me after the birth and to kind of help me with the kids and things like that. And my mom is an amazing woman, but she's very neurotic in terms of like birth, and she doesn't have the same philosophy of birth as I do. And so when I went into labor with my second, she was in the house, and she kept asking me, are we ready to go to the hospital? Are we ready to go to the hospital? What are you feeling? What are you feeling? And I felt that it was obstructing what I was doing, and it was obstructing what was going on in my mind, and the all the work that I've done. I was now in this very vulnerable spot of being really suggestive, you know what I mean, to what people around me were kind of feeling, and the anxiety in the room and the tension. And I didn't get that from my husband. My husband was like so believing in what was happening, but she was giving me this doubt of like, you need to go in, you need to go in, even though I knew that instinctively that my body wasn't ready yet. And so I actually rang my sister up who was living close by, and I said to her, you need to get her out of the house because I'm not going to the next stage because of her. And so even though her intentions were well, it was her own fears that were brought onto me. You know what I mean? And
Mm,
I didn't have
yeah.
those fears. I've worked on those fears. And that's why I kind of say it's so important who you have with you in the room. You choose to have your mom or your sister or a friend or your partner, or sometimes I've had women who've actually even chosen not to have their partner there because their fear is overwhelming. So having that correct and that right person in that room will speak paramounts for how you birth, you know? So thinking, who is the obstetrician? Who's the midwife? Where am I birthing? It will have a huge influence on how you birth your baby, because you will reach points in your labor where you are totally vulnerable. You've hit points that you never thought you'd hit before, and you say things that you never thought you'd say before. You might have a big cry. You might be just completely into unfolding bits of yourself that you never knew existed. And then are you looking at these people to support you, and are you seeing that support back? And that's really, really important. So I think it's one of the most valuable and important things you need to consider in labor.
I totally, absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Wow, we are very aligned, and that's so refreshing. It really is. So where can people find your work?
Okay, so I've got my website, which is 2life.com.au, and I'm on Instagram as 2lifedoula with a number 2. And yeah, usually I post on Instagram and Facebook. You can find me there, and you can just private message me. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I think also because so much of what you said, I'm just like grinning and shaking my head. I'm like, yes. So it it makes it easy. So thank you for your time. I know with you being in Australia and me being here on the East Coast in New York, we had to find it work, but we did. And this was just lovely. So thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
This has been an episode of Yoga Birth Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.